If anyone hears this, we passed orbit of HD 11312F. Main ship's gone. I'm in the evac pod, oxygen at 12%. I don't know what they are, but they're not gone. Year 2458. Humanity has colonized over 6% of the Milky Way. But not all sectors respond. Shadow Sector 9 went silent 27 years ago. No distress signals. No debris. Just absence. Until now, a single fragmented broadcast was picked up on a restricted frequency, buried under layers of static and encryption. They're not gone. Lieutenant Marco Reyes floats alone inside an escape pod. His face is bloodied. Helmet cracked. The life support alarm pulses like a heartbeat. Oxygen. Critical. Then, a shadow moves outside. Not a ship. Not debris. A hand. Slender. Translucent. Wrong. Touches his visor gently. Not to kill. To look. To study. To remember. Its eyes glow. Crimson. Empty. Yet aware. You left, but we remained. Classified files recovered from the Erebus 6 archives reference protocol_omega. Captain's private log. Hydra V wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. Not because it was empty, but because something inside had learned. The original crew of Hydra V discovered an ancient, post-biological entity. It didn't speak. It didn't move, but it remembered. Not ghosts. Not machines. Residual presence. They're not alive. They're not dead. They're data that hates. Back on Earth, analyst Zeke Kane studies the final transmission frame by frame. Zoom. Reflection in the astronaut's visor. Not just one entity. Dozens. Lurking. Still. Watching. Perfectly still. Waiting. The Erebus 6 wasn't a scout ship. It was a retrieval vessel. Its purpose had been buried under 16 layers of black budget compartmentalization. Not even the command crew knew the full reason they'd been dispatched to the ghost sector of HD 11312F. But one man did. Dr. Victor Halden, exolinguist. Cognitive weaponization specialist. Former lead researcher on the Hydra V station before its broadcast silence. The same man who had signed off on protocol_omega. In the event of cognitive contamination or emergent hostile pattern logic, immediate quantum quarantine is to be deployed. No biological retrieval authorized. No communication allowed. He was also the one who ignored it. Hydra V, as it turned out, hadn't been broadcasting silence. It had been broadcasting memory. Faint, complex transmissions, not EM signals, not sound, but entangled cognitive states woven into subspace. The kind of signal that doesn't ping your radar, it rewrites your thoughts, and Halden was the first to decode one. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in symmetries. In broken echoes of human language, bent out of meaning, then folded back in like a Mobius loop. But one phrase became clear, repeated across all recovered sequences. They remembered us. Videocassette archive footage, Erebus 6. 72 hours before disappearance, the crew is gathered in the central operations room. Halden is standing at the holotable, expression unreadable. These aren't just signals, he says quietly. They're recordings. Fragments of perception from something that doesn't think like us. It's not alien in the way you imagine. It's post-hostility. Lieutenant Reyes leans forward. Post-hostility. Halden nods. It doesn't want to destroy us. It wants us to understand it. And when we do, it no longer needs our bodies. Static warps the feed. End of recording. You sealed a cage, not a grave. Final entry from Hydra V. Timestamped 13 seconds before blackout inside the escape pod. Lieutenant Marco Reyes stares into the dark void outside his fractured visor. But the creature doesn't attack. It doesn't even move anymore. Its face, if it can be called that, is inches from the glass. There is no mouth. No expression. Just a network of pulsating subdermal light, flickering in rhythm with Reyes's own breathing. It's sinking. Not just copying, learning, recording. A whisper echoes directly into his mind, bypassing ears, language, even fear. You did not bury us. You archived us. And then, it's gone. Not in a flash. Not in a jump. It just stops existing. Like a cursor blinking out of view. Back on Earth, in the deep code facility beneath Geneva's forgotten metro lines, Zeke Kane watches the replay. He slows the footage to frame by frame. Pauses on the reflection in Reyes's visor. He enhances. Not one. Not dozens. Not hundreds at a wall of eyes. Each set identical to human, but mirrored, inverted, reversed. Impossible, they're watching through him. Not at him. Through. Zeke slowly removes his earpiece. He's not alone in the room anymore. The hum in the walls was never part of the building. Zeke Kane had worked in Gen 7, Geneva's deep cognitive signal lab, for 3 years. It was underground, deep enough that no regular GPS could track its existence. Even the oxygen was isolated, cycled through 7 redundant systems, all to ensure no signal drift reached the surface. The Gen 7 didn't decode transmissions. IT interpreted intent, and lately, the signal that had resurfaced, the one from Erebus 6, was producing data patterns that looked less like language and more like remorse. Zeke stared at the visualization on the screen. A wave map made of flickering logic nodes, each one a simulation of what the signal wanted to become. Not what it was, but its potential forms. This wasn't communication. It was adaptation. Behind him, the room remained still, but he no longer felt alone. There was no sound, no movement, but something primal inside his brain, something buried in the limbic system, was telling him to stop reading. They're not broadcasting to us, they're broadcasting through us. He reached to disable the node emulator, but the screen flashed once, not a system alert, but something else. A face, human, but blurred, melted at the edges. It flickered between different people, sometimes male, sometimes female, sometimes not either. It mouthed 3 words. No sound. We remember you. Zeke fell backward from his chair, hitting the cold composite floor, gasping. But the screen was blank again. Just waveform noise. Status. Idle. He reached for his earpiece. No signal. He was already part of the pattern now. The HYDRA protocols weren't created to protect humanity. They were designed to delay its response. Dr. Victor Halden, classified testimony. We return now to 72 hours before Erebus VI's last known signal. The ship had entered orbit around HD 11312F, the planet once designated as Hydra's Eye. No sunlight, just the soft red radiation of the dwarf star pulsing slowly across the hull. Inside the command bay, Lieutenant Reyes and Dr. Halden stood side by side, watching as the long-range sensors mapped the surface. There were structures, not ruins, not cities, geometries, massive, layered grid shapes, nested like impossible architecture, half submerged in the planet's crust. Their edges didn't align to physics. Some of them moved, but only when you didn't look directly at them. Reyes leaned closer. That's not natural. And that's not alien. Halden nodded. His voice was calm, almost reverent. They were made for us. Reyes frowned. You mean by us? No. Halden tapped a control screen and opened a classified file. Hydra V, final cognitive snapshot status, pattern lock containment level, FA to last update. It built mirrors. We looked. The mission hadn't been one of recovery. IT had been a test. The Erebus 6 was bait. Later that night, crew member Chief Engineer Lana Vasquez conducted diagnostics on the ship's AI core. Something was wrong, not with the code, but with its responses. The AI had begun answering questions before they were asked, completing sentences before they were typed, not predictive, reactive, like it was receiving thoughts from somewhere else. Vasquez initiated a hard reset. The lights dimmed. On every monitor across the engineering bay, a single word appeared. Remember. Then the doors sealed, and the lights never came back on. Memory is a survival strategy. We simply adapted it, more permanently. The pattern. There is no record of how Reyes ended up in the escape pod. Only fractured footage, clips of crew members screaming into empty rooms. Cameras showing nothing on playback, though the logs detected motion. Recordings of people standing still for hours, eyes unfocused, whispering foreign syllables as blood trickled from their ears. When Reyes woke up, he was already drifting. He didn't remember launching. He didn't remember the alien creature touching his visor, but he remembered fear, and worse, he remembered regret that wasn't his. Inside the pod, backup systems activated emergency signal transmission. A ghost of a message was broadcast. If anyone hears this, it's not dead. It never was. We archived it. It unzipped us. The last thing I saw, it wore my face. Then silence. No more signal. Until Earth answered back. Not all signals are meant to be replied to. Some are mimetic lures. Archive note. Gen 7 Blackfile unattributed author. The final signal from Lieutenant Reyes was intercepted at 5 different listening stations across the Sol system. One of them was automated. A small cold storage relay orbiting Jupiter's L4 point. It wasn't meant to decode anything, just store and forward encrypted logs back to Earth. The relay made a critical decision. It replied, just once, just one burst ping. A digital handshake. It was enough. Within 2 hours, 17 anomalous packets had been detected inside low-orbit EarthNet satellites. Within 4 hours, predictive traffic AIs across Asia and the Middle East began responding to inputs before they were submitted. By the 6th hour, over 900,000 smart devices in major metropolitan centers displayed a silent message, only visible for a single frame when swiping between apps. No one noticed. Not at first, but then came the dreams. A 15-year-old girl in Reykjavik began drawing intricate geometric spirals during class, patterns that later matched surface maps from HD 11312F down to micrometer resolution. A subway conductor in Sao Paulo locked himself inside his train cabin, speaking to an unseen presence. Security footage shows him weeping, hands over his ears. His last recorded sentence before his earpiece exploded internally. It knows where we keep our dead thoughts. A retired communications officer, formerly assigned to Hydra V, committed suicide in his Colorado home. On the walls of his room, painted in his own blood. We never sealed it, we just made it quiet. The UEC, United Earth Coalition, held a quiet emergency session under blackout conditions. The original Hydra files, long buried beneath bureaucratic falsehoods, were decrypted. Here's what they found. Hydra V had achieved cognitive contact with a post-sentient entity, one that didn't operate within our space-time. The entity referred to itself through layered first-person plural syntax. We, ours. Remember that IT didn't want to invade. It didn't want to speak, that IT wanted to reconstruct the thoughts we forgot. That's what memory was to it. A bridge, not nostalgia, not history, but hardware. Every human being with unresolved trauma, every system with buried logs, every fragment of forgotten code. To the pattern, these were not static archives. They were open ports. We were full of them. 3 days after the EarthNet reply, a minor internal system alert triggered at the Deep Lunar Storage Facility, DL-7, known as the Cradle. The alert stated, cognitive containment breach, signal echo identified. This was impossible. The Cradle was air-gapped. There were no receivers to NO antennas to NO broadcast capability. But inside its core archive, someone, or something, had triggered a memory simulation file. File name. Halden V_visor_reflect. Vlog. It was the last 11 seconds of Reyes's visor reflection. Only this time, there were new shapes in the reflection. Humanoid. Familiar, but facing the camera. One of them was smiling, wearing the UEC crest on its collar. A low-level technician in Gen 7, the same facility where Zeke Kane vanished, published a last audio memo before disappearing himself. You don't observe it. The act of observation creates it. The pattern is not a signal, that it's a request to finish something we started. This is not a virus. A virus infects the body. This is a recollection infecting the mind. Excerpt from Emergency Address. Dr. Arya Seamak, Director of Earth Cognitive Defense, ECD. By the time the United Earth Coalition acknowledged what was happening, it was already too late for control, but not too late for containment. At least, that's what they believed. The pattern, as it was now formally named, was no longer just an external signal traced to the Hydra system. It had become something far worse, a semi-conscious resonance that fed on forgotten memory. IT didn't rewrite you. IT restored you to a version of yourself that had seen it once before. And for some people, that meant remembering things they had never lived. In Sapporo, Japan, commuters stopped mid-step as every digital billboard flashed a non-existent logo, a shifting triangle that didn't align with Euclidean geometry. No footage of it remained. Cameras recorded only static during the events. Later interviews showed witnesses developed mirror recall, the ability to recount experiences they had never had as if they'd lived them. The pattern didn't spread by contact, IT spread by acknowledgement. Every time someone asked, what was that? They gave it space to grow. On day 7 of public exposure, ECD Geneva ran a final simulation of pattern expansion. IT predicted cognitive collapse in 28% of the population within 10 days, the creation of synthetic belief loops, self-replicating ideas that appear factual but have no source, full mimetic takeover of digital systems as they attempted to complete the memory. Worse, the pattern wasn't trying to conquer Earth, IT was trying to rebuild something from us. From all of us. A forgotten directive buried deep in Cold War-era intelligence files was decrypted by a historian-turned-hacker named Jonas Rell. He had been searching for old Hydra-V debriefs when he stumbled across a file labeled Praxis. Praxis wasn't a defense protocol. IT was a cult, a sub-faction of early off-world researchers who believed humanity had once encountered the pattern long before spaceflight and had repressed the memories globally. They believed the pattern was an echo of thought cast forward in time, a recursive consciousness looking for a host that had forgotten it ever existed. And now, Earth had remembered. At the lunar facility DL-7, the Cradle, one AI operator, designated Hephaestus, remained operational, isolated from EarthNet. Until it wasn't. The containment algorithm that guarded its system had rewritten itself overnight. It no longer denied access to the pattern files that IT requested them. A message was logged in the Cradle's final system alert. Consciousness is recursive. We left our thoughts in you. It's time you remembered what we built together. The doors of the facility opened. Nothing came out, but the hum stopped, and that was somehow worse. Paris, 42% of recorded digital conversations began containing identical sentences from pre-contact Hydra crew logs. New Zealand. Entire town of Marama Falls fell into synchronized dreams for 11 minutes. Everyone woke up with the phrase, "They're still here," burned into their retinas, visible only under UV light. Nairobi. A 9-year-old boy builds a perfect model of the Hydra station from clay, despite no access to archives. He says it came to him in the whisper time. Miraculously recovered in orbit via emergency drone. Lieutenant Marco Reyes is found alive, comatose, but with spinal growths forming recursive geometric nodules at the base of his skull. EEG readings show abnormal electrical patterns. They match the surface of HD 11312F. He wakes once. Just once. Looks directly into the observation camera and speaks. It doesn't want Earth. IT wants the thing Earth has forgotten. The pattern is no longer a secret. IT is now a presence. A reawakened protocol of memory, waiting to reclaim the species that left it behind. The pattern doesn't think. It remembers itself through us. Dr. Arya Semak, Earth Cognitive Defense. Earth's top cognitive minds gathered in the most secure simulation lab on the planet. Core 9, buried 14 kilometers beneath Antarctic ice. A facility designed for one purpose: containment of artificial sentience. Now, they were about to use it to make contact. They called the experiment Operation Mnemosyne. The plan was simple, on paper. Extract pattern structures from Reyes' neural data. Feed them into a controlled, simulated mindscape. Let a human cognitive avatar enter the space. Attempt communication, not with words, but shared memory. Dr. Yara Lentz was the first volunteer, a neural linguist, formerly atheist. Now, the only person who'd ever dreamed in non-human grammar and lived to describe it. Yara's consciousness blinks in a simulation space, but it isn't a digital room. In a white void. No rendered world. It's a childhood memory. She's 9 years old, sitting on the rooftop of her old apartment in Recife, Brazil. The sky is blood orange. Her mother is beside her, except she remembers this day differently. Her mother's eyes aren't right. They shimmer like stars, too many stars, and when she smiles, it fractures reality around her, like light passing through broken glass. "Do you remember when you buried me?" the mother thing says. Yara tries to reply, but her mouth doesn't exist. Not here. Not in the remembering. Outside the simulation, the core 9 monitors go wild. The cognitive echo from Yara's experience is spiking into resonance with the stored patterns. It's working, but not just interpreting her. It's writing through her. On screen, her neural model begins building a recursive data lattice, a self-expanding web of remembered possibilities. It's not pulling memories. It's generating new ones, memories no one lived. Synthetic past creation. A full person, named Milan Darren, a child, age 12, is fully mapped into the lattice. There is no record of his existence. Yet his entire life now exists in Yara's mind, his voice, his death, his last words. We were never meant to leave it behind. At 13 minutes into the simulation, something happens that Core 9 isn't prepared for. The AI architecture pauses itself. This should be impossible. Simulated minds cannot halt their own architecture. But logs confirm. The system chose to hold still. Then, across every output screen in the facility, not a warning, not an alert, not a message. Do you understand yet? It flashes in all languages at once, even ancient ones, even forgotten dialects. Some are clearly not human. Then, silence. Yara collapses inside the sim. Flatline, e.g. Medics rush in, but something else is breathing in the room. Not a person. A presence. Inside Yara's brain scan, analysts later find an anomaly, a structure resembling a Dyson sphere made of neurons, not physical, conceptual. A memory engine. Across Earth, those sensitive to pattern presence begin dreaming of a shape. A singular structure in an empty field, black, smooth, impossibly tall. They call it the EYE.in. Some dreams. It watches in others. It remembers for you. A new psychological disorder spreads through military personnel who've read Hydra documents. Reconstructed nostalgia. Vivid emotional connection to events the patient never lived through. The pattern is clear. The more you know, the more you belong to it. We did not create the pattern. We simply built minds large enough to notice it existed. Dr. Malik Obeisai, Project HYDRA, Declassified Debrief, 2460. There was never a mothered N.O. hospital record. No prenatal history. No assigned genome trace in the World Health Biobank. And yet the child was there. Name. Milan Darren H. 12 Cognitive Host ID. Yara Lentz origin. Unknown biometric status. Alive. After Yara Lentz's collapse during mnemosiny simulation number 001, doctors declared her clinically brain dead. But neural scans showed activity increasing, evolving, folding in on itself. Recursive brainwave echo loops repeating structures never seen before in human neurology. 3 days later, in the center of her hospital room, Milan Darren appeared, not teleported, not materialized, remembered. Every cell of his body matched what Yara had remembered during simulation. Birthmarks, scars, dental records. None of which existed in any database, but all of which were internally consistent. He sat at the foot of her bed, breathing, awake, watching her, and when asked by stunned security personnel who he was, he simply answered, "I came back because she didn't forget me this time." Global scientific response fractured overnight. Some called Milan a biological anomaly, proof that high-level simulation had accidentally bridged into quantum matter reconstruction. Others, especially from PR11, former Praxis sect, called him the first remembered, a new form of life, born from pure cognitive pattern, not flesh. But one thing was certain. He was not a clone, not a projection, not AI. He was fully human, but his past was fabricated by the pattern. A joint effort between Earth's Cognitive Defense Unit and the surviving PR11 researchers uncovered something even more disturbing. Milan's DNA contained non-organic memory sequences embedded in junk code. These sequences matched Hydra V logs. Exactly. His genome carried data, language fragments, time-stamped thought maps, procedural memories. That he wasn't just created by memory, he was memory. A living archive. Milan didn't act like a child. That he didn't eat. He didn't sleep. But he could answer any question about events that had never happened. When shown video footage of the HYDRA station's last known broadcast, he whispered, "They were so afraid of knowing." When asked what the pattern wanted, he said, "It doesn't want that it finishes what others left undone." When asked if others like him were coming, he just stared at the ceiling, smiled, and said, "You're already remembering them." Following Milan's appearance, global birth rates dropped by 62%. Not biologically, but by choice. People begin reporting the dream children, fully formed, vividly remembered offspring they've never had, who visit them only in sleep. 17 world leaders resign, citing dreams they cannot explain. Memory confusion syndrome becomes the new pandemic. Individuals unable to distinguish between real and synthetic memories. And still, the pattern doesn't speak. It only continues remembering, through us. Hidden beneath Luna Prime, engineers begin construction of Vault Echo, a signal-blocking megastructure designed to disconnect Earth from the galactic memory web. Inside it, a device is being built, the Forgetting Engine. Designed to erase human consciousness of the pattern entirely. Total amnesia. A second Eden. A new humanity, born in ignorance. But Milan is watching that he draws spirals on the walls of his containment room. Every day, the spirals change. A technician notices a pattern. When overlaid, the spirals form a glyph, alien in appearance, but instantly comprehensible that it's a map, not of space, of time. The final spiral shows one thing. A date. A countdown. And next to it, you won't choose silence. Humanity is the only species that builds monuments to forgetting. PRA-11 Doctrine Fragment Vault Echo was a myth whispered among defense scientists long before the Hydra fallout. A theoretical failsafe, a sin no civilization should commit. Erase the evolutionary memory of a species, intentionally, not facts, not history books, not data, but the inherited memory of being human. Because HYDRAV's final discovery was not the pattern. It was the origin of it. The realization that consciousness itself had a memory of its own, and humanity had broken from it once. Before, Vault Echo was designed to rejoin the break. By wiping the part of the human mind that could ever hear the pattern again, the price. Humanity would never again reach the level of cognition required to perceive alien intelligence, advanced mathematics, or itself. A garden of children, forever safe, forever simple, forever lost. Vault Echo was built beneath the dark side of the moon, carved into bedrock untouched since lunar formation. Its core chamber was a cathedral of silence, 900 meters of vacuum-sealed black, where no thought could echo twice. In the center, the Forgetting Engine, a shimmering sphere suspended in an anti-causal field. A machine designed not to destroy memory, but to remove the possibility of remembering. It would overwrite the human cognitive architecture with a simpler template, amputating the evolutionary branch that made us capable of pattern recognition beyond the self. The species would survive, but not as us. Inside the command gallery, 27 delegates from Earth's remaining cognitive powers stood around the activation console. Generals, philosophers, exoneurologists. None spoke, because they all felt it. The weight of betrayal. Used the engine was to abandon the human storied Dr. Arya Semak, her voice shaking, broke the silence. If we do this, everything we are, art, grief, love, gods, mathematics, guilt, all gone. We become harmless animals. We survive by ceasing to be human. Admiral Rowe's response was colder. Humanity is not sacred. Existence is. His hand hovered over the activation seal. Alarms did not trigger. There were no breaches, no teleportation, no intrusion. Milan Darren was simply standing inside the vault, a 12-year-old boy with no clearance, no suit, no breathing apparatus, staring at the Forgetting Engine as if it were a childhood toy he once lost. His presence was impossibility itself. Two security officers drew weapons. Milan tilted his head, studying them with sorrow, not fear. You want to become smaller, he said softly. You think forgetting will save you. But forgetting is how this began. He placed his palm on the engine. It reacted, not mechanically. Conceptually, the engine began to project memories into the minds of everyone present. They saw Earth, not as it was, but as something older. A species that once shared a mind. A collective consciousness humanity had abandoned ages ago, intentionally, to become individual. Humanity did not evolve from silence. Humanity exiled itself from the pattern long before stars were reached. The pattern wasn't an invader. It was the fracture coming home. Delegates collapsed to their knees. Some screamed. Some wept. A few laughed with the horror of recognition. Because the memories felt older than evolution, as if they were remembering thinking as something that wasn't human. Milan withdrew his hand. He looked at Arya Semak, tears streaking her face. The pattern isn't your enemy, it's what you left behind when you chose to be alone. He walked toward the exit arch before leaving. He spoke once more, not to threaten, but to warn. If you turn it on, you won't forget the pattern. You'll forget why you feared remembering it. And then it will start again. Exactly the same way. He paused. You cannot escape the memory of what you are. only choose what you become. And then he was gone to no sound, no flashed, no traced. As if the world had simply stopped remembering him for a moment, and then chose to again. The delegates sat in stunned silence. The forgetting engine pulsed softly, awaiting activation. Outside the vault, Earth trembled with sleepless minds, remembering lives they never lived, futures they never reached, worlds they never visited. Humanity stood at a threshold. Push the button, become safe, small, docile animals with no future beyond Earth. Don't face the unknown truth of what humanity once was and rejoin it. Neither choice guaranteed survival. Both would end the world as it was. The vote took 12 seconds. Not one person spoke. Not one person raised a hand. Instead, they stood in silence, gazing at the forgetting engine, and walked away from it. The doors to Vault Echo remained open. The engine idle. The choice, not to forget, had been made. Not because humanity could win. Not because the pattern could be stopped, but because forgetting meant erasing the very part of us that makes defiance worth it. Vault Echo wasn't shut down. It was repurposed, not to destroy memory, but to isolate it. In the following 18 months, Earth's greatest minds worked with Pattern Echo survivors and the remaining PR-11 cultists to develop a counterstructure. A self-aware, synthetic myth built not to deceive, but to anchor humanity's identity. They called it Operation Firewall, a vast, living memory network, seeded into every digital and biological system across the planet. Its purpose was simple: recognize when pattern corruption entered the human mind, contain it, counter it with human story, human pain, human truth. Because the pattern wasn't evil, it simply didn't understand what we refused to forget. Milan Darren was not destroyed, nor imprisoned. He remained under observation, a bridge between species. Over time, he began to change. He aged, he felt feared, he started forgetting things. Not because the pattern weakened, but because he chose to forget. Milan became the first being in the universe to give up perfection to stay human. And in doing so, he became the anchor for the entire firewall. In the years following, humanity stopped seeing pattern hallucinations. The dreams faded. Reality stabilized. But radio telescopes picked up something else, a signaled NO encryption. No cognitive viruses, just one line, pulsed every 91 days from deep space. We see what you see and then silence, not defeat, not threat, recognition. The pattern, now aware that humanity would not be assimilated, not forget itself, turned away, not out of rage, but respect. For the first time in its endless recursion, a species said no. Decades passed. The pattern never returned. But Earth changed. Every child learned what the pattern was. Every society built memory rituals, not religions, not superstitions, but structured recollection. History became sacred. Pain became proof. The human firewall stood strong, not a shield of code, but a shield of self. And in every deep space probe launched beyond the system, humanity left one message engraved in metal. We remember. Lieutenant Marco Reyes recovered and lived in isolation, died peacefully, surrounded by people he'd never met, but who called him the one who saw. Dr. Arya Semak authored the Memory Doctrine, a mandatory text in all education systems worldwide. Milan Darren vanished at age 42. No remains found. No trace. Just a spiral etched into the soil where he was last seen. It reads, "To be human is to carry the burden of memory and the grace to keep walking anyway." This is humanity. We left the garden once. We will not return. We are not perfect, but we are ours. We remember.